Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So, I just want to quickly apologize for the very long absence, the very radio silent absence that I had. I think the last video I did was like a Pan Those Eyeshadows update, and that was like a month ago. So I do apologize for that. I just had a lot of things going on from like August until now, which would be like, you know, the early parts of September. Just a lot of heavy stuff, and I just really didn't feel like I was in a very good headspace to sit down and film, and like turning on the camera and talking about makeup. It was just the furthest thing from my mind, so I really just needed to take that step back and kind of, you know, be present in other moments of my life. And I know that you guys are more than understanding of that, but I just wanted to address it, like, you know, kind of, it just felt weird to not say anything at all because it was kind of like the elephant in the room, you know what I mean? But I feel good now. I feel a little bit like more back to normal. Like I feel, you know, ready to sit down and turn on the camera. Like I have missed this part of my life. I have missed, you know, doing this and editing videos and putting them up and replying to comments, which is something that I'm really far behind on. So again, I apologize for that too. But I've also really missed like binge watching videos, you know, that other people create. I am so far behind on like my watch playlist. Like it's not even funny. So I'm trying to catch up. But yeah, as you can probably tell, I'm a little rusty, a little rambly. But yeah, I'm ready to sit down and come back and film. Okay, so speaking of filming, what are we sitting down to do today? I would like to do an eyeshadow palette shopping block. I'm sure that's very apparent by the title, but I'm still going to say it anyway. So I feel like every year when we get to this part of the year, you know, it's the last half of the year, we are on the back nine. I really take a look at my makeup collection, and I really try to decide, like, okay, there are items where I'm unsure about, like I'm on the fence. Do I actually like you? Are you something that I want to bring into 2023 with me? If you're not something that I want to bring into 2023 with me, do you need to be passed along, or do I need to zero in on you and try to finish you off before the year is up? So that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of the headspace that I am in. So I do here beside me have this rather large stack of eyeshadow palettes where it's like, okay, I open you up and I think you're pretty. Or the last time I used you, maybe it wasn't like the greatest eyeshadow look. So I just really want to take the time to like scrutinize these palettes and make sure that I actually do enjoy them, that they have a place in my collection. And so I thought it would be fun to like take you guys in along for the journey. So as you can see, this is a rather large stack of eyeshadow palettes. I'm going to pause all of my other like panning content. So pan that palette, pan those eyeshadows, project level up. Like all of that is non-existent to me right now so that I can solely focus in on these palettes and try to use all of them before the end of the year so that I can make that decision. My goal is to try to create 2 to 3 looks with every single palette in this stack. So then I hope that in update videos, like I'm not going to wait to update you when I've used all these palettes because that would be a very long video. Hopefully once I get through like maybe 2 or 3 and then have, you know, 2 to 3 looks with each palette to show you guys, I can come on here and update you the fate of the palette. You know, did it survive the chopping block, or is it actually something that I'm going to declutter and pass on? So I will get into this stack in no particular order. I'll talk about some reasons why, you know, these palettes are in the chopping block, and hopefully that sounds exciting to you. All right, so like I said, in no particular order, we're just going to go through these. So the first palette that is in my chopping block comes from Oden's. So this is part of their Alva 2 collection. This was the Mini Ocean palette. Now this was not a palette that I purchased for myself way back in March, I think, because I believe it was an Easter mystery box, but it was a mystery box. So that is how I acquired this palette. So it is a 6-pan palette because the middle shade here is a split pan. It does have 2 shimmers in it. So objectively, when I look at this, every shade individually is pretty, but for me, this is not a very cohesive color story. Specifically, these like red, orangey, brown shades down here really throw me off and throw off the vibe of this color story, in my opinion. I really wish they would have just kind of committed with this like blue-purple kind of theme, and it is called the Mini Ocean. So, you know, I don't know if this is supposed to represent the sand or the fish or the what, but it just altogether doesn't really make sense to me. So I don't tend to dip into this palette to do like a one full complete look. And that is something that I do want to be able to do with every palette in my collection. Now, I am fine mixing and matching palettes. I think that's a great way to add new life into things. But I want to make sure that the palettes that I have can be standalone palettes, you know? The other reason why I want to put this palette in on the chopping block is specifically because of this center shade here too. So it is a split pan, like I said, and it just, I don't know, I have a weird hang up about it. Like, I'm just so afraid that I'm either going to ruin the blue or the icy purple shade if I do dip into this. So I don't know, if you own one of these mini palettes from Oden's Eye, because they all do that, they all have a split pan shimmer within the center of them, let me know, did you ruin yours when you started like actually using it and things like that? But yeah, this is the first palette that is on the chopping block. Alright, so the next palette that is on the chopping block is a very used palette within my collection. This is quite an old palette. If you do not like the look of dirty, beat up, used makeup, just skip ahead on the video. So this is the Persona Identity palette. This is the first one that they had. You guys know, like, this palette and me, we have been through some things, and I do absolutely love this palette. So you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, like, Haley, you do love this palette. Why is it in your chopping block? So this shade Charming right here was one of the shadows that was in my last round of Pan Those Eyeshadows. I did end up hitting Pan on it, as you guys can see. But as I was using it, I felt like my eyes would water a lot. Now, we were in allergy season, and I just experienced like super watery, runny eyes. It doesn't matter like what kind of medication I try to take, like nothing helps it. So I don't want to say that this palette has like expired or gone off. Like, I want to put it to the test now where my eyes are much more under control and they're not watery, they're not itchy, they're not burning just on their own, you know, regardless of what I put on them. So I really just, yeah, like I said, I want to make sure that this palette is still good, that it hasn't went off and expired. If I'm not mistaken, this palette released in what, like 2018, maybe 2019 at the latest, and I got it like pretty soon after it launched, so it is decently old. If it is something that I do have to declutter and unfortunately put into the bin because it has went off and expired, I won't feel bad because look at how much use I have gotten out of it. Like, I have completely finished off 3 shades, as you can see, and I now have Pan in 4 shades. So this palette has definitely been well loved for the journey that we have been on together. But I just want to make sure if I can keep on loving it or not. So let's pull out this big guy too, because this and the Persona one are palettes that I really do enjoy, but I do, like I said, think that maybe they have went off, and so I need to just really test that out and scrutinize it now. So this is the Lorac Mega Pro I. This one was gifted to me by my mother, and I honestly don't know how long she has had it in her collection. So this is a rather large Mega Pro palette. I do have Pan in some of the shades here, 3 pans, and then these 2 came shattered, so these were non-existent. But like I said, much with like the Persona palette, I felt like every time I pulled this out and used it over the summer months, my eyes were just maybe a little more itchy and watery than what I had noticed like the day prior. So again, it could have very well just been allergies, but I just want to make sure, since we're now in a time where my eyes are not bothering me as much. But yeah, if I use this and I do experience those same problems, then unfortunately this one, like the Persona one, will have to go into the bin. These won't be eligible to be passed on, but I am okay with that. Again, this one was a gift. My mom had purchased it for herself and she just didn't end up liking it. I had this palette as well in my collection a few years ago, and I ended up panning a bunch of shades from it. So this palette, while this one hasn't gotten a lot of use out of it, my previous one that I had got way more use, and I do really enjoy the Lorac formula. Again, you can tell it's been a while. So yeah, I just want to make sure that it is something that, you know, hasn't went off and expired. Okay, so this next palette to talk about, I think this was in my round 2 of would I repurchase these 10 eyeshadow palettes. So this is from Sugar Drizzle. This is their Butterfly palette. If I'm not mistaken, that is the name on it. So this one was very much an impulse purchase. Now, I really do like the Sugar Drizzle formula. Their mattes can be a little bit more on the drier side, but I've never had an issue with like blending them out or making them work or just, you know, using the palette in general. So that's not really the issue here. The color story of this particular palette is a little bit disjointed for me personally. Again, kind of like with the Mini Ocean palette, when I look at this, every shade individually is really pretty, but I really struggled to come to this and create a full-on look. So is this something that I want to continue to have in my collection? The other hesitation I have when using this palette is a lot of these shimmer shadows like this, and this one, they're very like dark based shimmers, and I really like a lighter shimmer. I typically do this kind of eye look where you have a really dark, deep, like matte outer V, and then you have lighter shimmer shades on the inner eyelid. I just feel like that makes my eyes look a bit like wider, more open and poppy. So that's kind of the eye looks that I like to do. I really don't get a lot of use out of like really deep, dark shimmers, which is what some of this palette is. So again, I just want to use this and make sure, like, am I happy with it? Can I create looks that I'm really, interested in? Okay, so this next palette on the chopping block might surprise you just a little bit. So it is from Juvia's place. It is the Tribe palette. Now the background of this is super reflective, and I do have the ring light on because it is like 11 o'clock at night. So that's really reflective. I think this is the best I can do, but it's the Tribe palette. You guys probably know what this looks like. So I do have one pan in this like limey green shade up here. I really do enjoy this palette overall. However, I really only think of two shadows within this palette that I feel like I would actually miss if it were gone, So this Koro shade here, and then this Kuba shade here, which I know I just got done saying I don't like dark shimmers on my lid. But what I love to do is put down this Kuba shade and then top Koro off on top of it. And it's this really pretty like blue-green kind of limey shimmer shadow. It ends up being, it's really pretty. If you have this palette, try that out. But all of these other shades in here, I honestly could like take them or leave them. You know what I mean? And especially since my eyeshadow palette collection, as far as green eyeshadows go, or like orange-based green shadows, or like brown-based green shadows, things like that go, it's really exploded. And so I have other green-themed eyeshadow palettes, we will say, that I think of far before I think of this palette. So it really just boils down to, I want to use this, try to come to it and see, like, would this actually be something that I would miss in my collection, or can I pass it along? I will say the shadows that always give me a really hard time to work with are this bottom dark green kind of tealy shade here. I find that this one can be super patchy and difficult to blend out. And then this shimmer shade here, it's like a red-orange shimmer, and objectively it's pretty, but I struggle to find ways that I want to wear it. And then this center shade here is a more like golden-based shimmer shade, like a bronzy golden shade. And I'm just not like a bronzy type girl. Like, I do enjoy doing more neutral eye looks from time to time, but I feel like cool tones, or like the mauve tones and like the berries and things like that, that's more what I gravitate towards when I'm wanting like a more neutral eye look. So again, I just want to see how me and this palette get along. Okay, so the next palette on the chopping block comes from Menagerie. So this is their Whalesong palette. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this palette has been discontinued, but don't quote me on that. I am not totally sure. So the biggest reason that this palette is here in the chopping block is because the last few times that I have used it, especially using these darker shades here, specifically these three in this corner, I have found that they stain my eyelids. And so I typically put down a concealer, and then I put down an eyeshadow primer, and then I set my eyeshadow primer, and then I go in and do like my eyeshadow looks. So I feel like that is a triple layer of, protection on my eye, we will say, and you're still managing to stain it. Like, that's a little much. Now, I will say, I just go in with some micellar water. I use the one from Garnier, and I do have to scrub a little bit, but I am able to get it off. Like, it's fine. It doesn't linger into the next day, but it's like, I have blues in my collection that don't do that, that are just as dark and like gorgeous as these ones, and they don't stain. So specifically, when I do think of this palette, I am thinking more of the shimmers. Now, there's only 4 shimmers within this palette. It is very matte heavy, but I do want to put this in here, really test it out and play with it and see, like, is this, again, something that I would miss, something that I want to have? And I feel like for me personally, it's a lot harder to part with indie eyeshadow palettes than more like mainstream palettes or drugstore palettes. I don't know what it is, like, it's not like, I don't know, it's just like a weird hang up I have where it's like, but you supported an indie brand, like, you have to keep it, Are you guys that way too? Okay, so the next palette that we will talk about that is on the chopping block comes from Give Me Glow Cosmetics. So this is their Christmas morning palette. I pined after this for a long time before I finally bit the bullet and purchased it. And it is a really pretty color story. Like, this is Christmas in a palette. Like, they did nail it. Now, the shimmer shadows in here, it's 4 shimmers and then 4 matte shades. The shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. They are the type of shimmer shades where it looks like you have that like fold eyeshadow effect, you know, like you sprayed your brush, you put in a lot of extra effort when you really didn't. So I do have to, you know, really shout them out for that. The matte formula within this palette, though, is on the more drier side. And so it's just a little bit harder to work with. I don't want to say that it's completely like unusable, because it's not. But it does take a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra work, a little bit of extra finessing to get it the way that I want it. And the matte shadows in here are nothing special. You know, it's a matte forest green, a matte neutral brown, a matte red, and then like a matte kind of gray brown. So I have those time and time again in my collection, and they perform a lot better. So do I want to continue to fool with this palette and have those issues with it, you know what I mean? Or is this something that I can just pass along? Like, am I actually going to miss it? I'm on the fence, because honestly, the only like real special shade from within this palette is the Gifts Galore shade. So it's this really pretty like green shade, but it has like a little bit of like a flip to it. Like, it has some blueness, but also some like grayness to it. Super pretty, but they do sell this as a single. So I have the palette. That's why I want to make sure, do I love it? And if it ends up being something that I do pass on, I might just purchase that Gifts Galore shade as a single. Okay, so only 3 more palettes to talk about. So the next 2 both come from Nomad Cosmetics. So I have the America's Parks palette here. Now, this one I have already done 3 complete eye looks with earlier in the year as part of the Deck of Panning Project Pan, I think. So what I found when I used these shadows was that some of the mattes were a little bit fussy. Like, you couldn't really build them up on each other successfully, and they could be a little bit difficult to blend out. So the one that I really remember being hard to blend out is this matte purple shade up here. And then I think I did a look where I tried to layer the purple and the brown. Like, I put down the purple first and then tried to use the brown to like deepen it up in the outer V. And again, it just became kind of patchy. Like, you couldn't really build the shadows on top of each other. So it was just really frustrating. And I am very much a person where I do like to start my eyeshadows off with the lightest shade, move into the darkest, then do the shimmers, yada, yada, yada. So it's okay if I have to do that in reverse, but it's just not my particular like favorite method of doing eyeshadow looks. So yeah, I just want to play around with this one more. And then I do remember the shimmers in here, specifically the shimmers within this middle row. They are not like the punchy in your face type of shimmers. If you have experienced like Lorac, like the Lorac Mega Pro I palette, or like their old Pro palettes, those shimmers are nice, they're fine, but they're not the punchy in your face shimmers, right? So that's kind of like what Nomad shimmers are, and I get it. Not everyone wants like a really intense, like in your face shimmer eyeshadow, but I do. And so I just want to pull this out, use it, and see, can I make this work? Can I get those shimmers to really pop? Because honestly, I can't remember if I sprayed my brush, or if I used my NYX glitter glue, or did I use concealer, or what, you know, what was I using when I did do those 3 looks. So I'm going to try a few different methods and just see if I can get this to work for me. Okay, so like I said, speaking of Nomad, I have the Haunted Europe palette. Now this one I have not yet used. I have swatched a few shadows from within this palette. I really just haven't used it because the America's Parks palette has kind of like left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. However, I feel like I saw way more people give this palette like a good review over the America's Parks palette. So again, I've already spent my money on these things. Like, I don't want to just declutter them to, you know, declutter them. Like, I really want to make sure that it is something that I don't like. So that's why we're doing this. But anyway, when I look at this palette, like, it's a little chaotic, like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I feel like the color story is a little bit disjointed, but I'm up for the challenge. Like, I do want to play around with this. I'm really intrigued by like these 2 matte shadows down here. I'm really intrigued by like some of the green shimmers. These gold shades, I don't know. I'm gonna like push myself to use some of these more golden shadows, because again, golds and bronzes just aren't like my favorite things to use and wear, but they are in this palette, so I do want to make sure that I do try them out. But these two do look very similar, just looking at them in the pan. This one might be a little bit more darker, and this one might be like a little bit more of like a banana kind of gold, we'll say. But yeah, so I do have the Haunted Europe palette to test out. Okay, so the very last palette to talk to you about does come from Melt Cosmetics. So this is the Amor Mariposas palette. You guys have heard me go on and on about this palette, how I don't think it was worth the $70. Like, I have a hard time with this, yada, yada, yada. Other than the Lorac Mega Pro I and the Persona Identity 1 palette, because those are more in here to see, like, have they expired, have they went off. Everything else is more like in the grouping of, do I actually like it? You know, was it a mistake purchase? So this falls into that. Was it a mistake purchase? So out of those palettes, this one has been the most used. Like, I have tried to make this work for me. So sitting there, you might be like, Haley, just go ahead and declutter it. Like, you've already fussed and fooled with it. But I'm not yet ready to admit defeat. And I specifically think that's one of two things. One, the price tag. Like, it was an expensive palette. And so I just really want to put it to the test before I actually declutter it, because it was so expensive. And then two, everyone else that I've seen use this palette has given it such a glowing review. So, like, what am I doing wrong? I don't know. I will say I have found that when I stick to a certain color family within this palette, I'm a little bit more successful with the eye look turning out okay. So, like, if I just play with the purples and maybe like this pinky shimmer, like, my eye look looks good. Or if I stick to more of these like kind of brown based shadows and maybe play with like some of these golden shimmers, my eye look looks fine. But when I try to combine those different colors, it becomes muddy and messy, and I just don't like it. And I have other palettes where I do combine those colors and it works out wonderfully. So I don't know what the issue is here. I know that Melt can be a little bit more of a difficult formula to work with. And I will say too, this top row, this green row, was a row that really kind of drew me into the palette. Obviously, I love my greens, but I feel like this green row within this palette is super underperforming. The matte shadows within that green row, I feel like they never look on my eyes like how they look in the pan. Like, the depth of them is not there once you apply them to your eyes. So yeah, I just need to, I guess, maybe with this one specifically, look at a few more people's reviews and see how are they using this palette, how are they applying this palette. But yeah, I really just want to get this to work. Okay, so since we are kind of like in the fall season, and I really do wear whatever eyeshadow I want whenever I want, but I am very much a like seasonal person still. Like, in the fall time, I'm much more wanting to wear like the berries and the oranges and the yellows and the greens and things like that. So in saying that, I think these four are the palettes that I'm going to try to focus in on and really put my attention on. So first being the Persona Identity palette and the Lorac Mega Pro I, mainly because, like I said, I think that these two might have went off and expired because of their age. So I just want to test those out and really make sure, you know, sooner rather than later. But then as far as like fall color stories go, the Haunted Europe palette and the Melt Amor Mariposas palette really do scream fall vibes for me. So I am going to focus in on those four first, probably. Don't hold your breath over that, because Haley's a little bit flaky and she'll probably do something very different now that that is out in the universe. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It was a little bit of a longer video, a little bit more chatty. Like I said, as soon as I've worked through 2 to 3 palettes, like, we'll come back on here. I'll update you on this chopping block series. But yeah, let me know down below, are there any palettes that you have that are on like your chopping block, or just any makeup in general that is on your chopping block where you're like, I don't know if I want to bring you into the new year with me. So again, I thank you guys for sticking around, for watching this. I hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.